Now, in addition to the other things we've covered around JavaScript objects in this course, there are 4 more things I'd like to cover with you because I wish I had known about them a little bit earlier on in my own JavaScript adventures. So let's take a look at this object. It's user obj, and it is being stored in a constant, and there are 2 key value pairs inside it, name Aruba and age 31. If you wanted to access the name key value pair, how would you do it? Well, typically you would do user obj dot name. And if you do that, you get Aruba. Great. However, that is not the only way you can access a property inside an object. You can actually use the square bracket notation as well. So user obj, and then open up your square brackets, and then open up quotation marks. And then type in the name of your property. So in this case, name. You can see we get Aruba. If I were to change that to age, we'll get 31. Now, you might be thinking, isn't that actually how you access arrays? Yes, because arrays in JavaScript are actually a type of object. Discussing that is out of scope for this particular series, but it's good for you to know that. Here's the thing. As you can see, we wrapped it in quotes when we put it inside the square notation. This is because JavaScript objects are made up of key value pairs. And the key in that key value pair is always a string. It must always evaluate to a string. So that opens up some interesting, options. For example, a string like this, favorite movies, wrapped in string, of course, in quotations because of that space, is actually a valid key. And then I can give it any value I want, because in that key value pair, the key needs to be a string, but the value can be anything you want it to be. So let me fill that in. Okay, so if I want to access that, if I try to use the dot notation, it's not really going to work. So obviously that's going to return an error because movies on its own, that space just makes it all confusing. If I want to access a key that has a space in it of some kind, I'm going to have to use that square bracket notation, open up those quotes, and then type in favorite movies. And there you go. We've got our array with the 2 favorite movies in there. So that's the first 2 things. You can use the square bracket notation in order to access objects, and all keys inside objects are strings. So the next thing I want to talk about is the concept of this. This is a special variable reference that you can use inside objects in order to reference its own properties. So we've touched on this very lightly before, but in JavaScript objects, of course, you can have functions as well. So I could have something like greeting and open that up. And that is actually a valid method. That's what it's called. It's a method of that JavaScript object. And let's say I want to create a greeting where it takes in the name of the person and spits out a sentence like, "Hi, my name is Aruba." Well, I can actually do it like this. So return, I want to put this using template literal, so I'm going to open up my backticks. And then inside that variable, I can actually use this dot name for Aruba. So let me make that a real sentence now. Now, if I were to access that, so user obj dot greeting, you can see it says, "Hi, my name is Aruba." That's a really nice way to reference the current object that that method belongs to and grab any values that are in there. The other thing you might be wondering is, we learned about square notations. How does that work with a method? So if I wanted to use the square notation for this, it would be something like this. Open up the square notations, then type in greeting, because it always needs to be a string, and then after the square notation, put in the 2 brackets that denotes a function call. And if I do that, you can see that function call remains correct. So this is related to another video that we have in the course called optional chaining. And if you go through that, you'll see how we demonstrate that the brackets that denote a function call are actually separate from the name itself, which we're actually using. The last thing I want to cover is object constructors, or the way I like to think about them, object templates. So let's say that you have this user object that has the name, age, and that greeting function, but you want to make multiple user objects. It would be pretty tiresome and not very dry to constantly populate that same name, age, and greeting function again and again. Instead, you can create a template, a constructor, that lets you whip up a new object whenever you need. So here's how you do that. So in order to create a user constructor, an object constructor that is, we need a function. And the convention is that such a function should start with a capital letter. So I'm going to create a function called user, because that's what I want to call the object. And then I can open this up, and then using that same this reference name variable that we learned about, we can go this.name and then give it a value of, say, null for now. This.age, again, null until we fill it out. And then this.greeting. And since this is a method, I'm going to write it out like this very explicitly and just grab that return from there. Now, if I want to create a new user, I can go const and then let's say second user, and then use that new phrase, new keyword, to initialize a new user object. Now, if I was to console log out second user, you can see that it has name, age, and that greeting already in here. We can go a little bit further. Let's say that we always want to initialize a user with a name. So we can actually take in a name parameter here and then fill out the this.name with that parameter. And then in here in second user, I can pass it a name. And now you can see that our user has a name. And if I were to use our greeting function on it, we would get, hi, my name is Ronnie. So square notations, string keys, the this reference keyword, and this ability to create a constructor. These are 4 quick things that would be really helpful. I wish I knew about them before, and now you do.